In this video, we will be discussing the broad overview of the psychology of learning and memory, how it becomes a subject of psychology from early philosophical thought, and how different psychological theories explain the acquisition and retention of new and existing behaviors. Okay, so let's first take a look at Clive Wearing. Clive Wearing had quite a bit in life. He was a talented and highly regarded conductor and deeply in love with his wife. But due to a virus that affected his brain, his memory was swiped from him. This is because a part of his brain, the hippocampus, an area required for transferring memories from short-term to long-term memory, was severely damaged. And after this incident, his memory only lasted for about 7 to 30 seconds. And as a result, he suffers from anterograde and retrograde amnesia. He constantly feels as if he has been recently awoken from a comatose state, or recently woken up from a deep sleep. However, he could recognize his wife and his kids, and that he had kids. He could speak and understand words. He could play the piano very well still, but he forgot much about the past. And has difficulty forming new memories. In this course, we will understand these many facets of learning and memory. In this course, we will learn about these many facets of learning and memory. Why damage to the hippocampus causes learning and memory problems. Why emotional memories can remain largely unaffected, such as Clive Wearing remembering his wife and knowing his wife. And also discuss perceptual motor skills. Why he can still play the piano and remember how to play the piano very well. Okay, so we should first understand the definition of learning. Learning is the changes in behavior that arise as a result of experience interacting with the world. And memory is the record of these past experiences, which are acquired through learning. In this video, we will discuss how ideas might be linked together in memory when we try to remember events, how much of our behavior can be attributed to what we learn and acquire and to our nature, and what we inherit. And the textbook shows us the differences and similarities of animals and humans in both. And the textbook shows us the differences and similarities there are between animals and humans in learning and memory. Based on experimental tasks and trials. Based on experimental tasks and research. Another thing is that in the beginning, the study of learning and memory was more of a branch of philosophy. Philosophers of old would gain insight and attempt to obtain truth not so much from scientific experimentation, but through reasoned thought and logical argument. What was highly contested among philosophers is how do we gain knowledge? How is knowledge attained? Is it from experience, or is it more inborn? Aristotle believed that knowledge emerges from experience, that the mind of a newborn is a blank slate, that the mind of a newborn is more like a blank slate. Plato thought that the bulk of our knowledge is innate. As you might guess, most modern scientists think it is really both experience and genetics that play a role in how we learn and gain knowledge, and our capacities for knowledge. But Aristotle, a Greek philosopher, was one of the first to write about memory. He gathered data from observations of the natural world and attempted to formulate theories. Associationism is the principle that memory depends on the forming of Associationism is the principle that memory depends on the forming of linkages between pairs of events. We will see this definition and term throughout this course, but I will show you a few slides here. As you read the word that I'm going to show you, think about what comes to mind. Okay, let's start. Chair. What do you think about this? What type of chair comes to your mind? Do you imagine a chair next to a table? Do you imagine wood chair, metal chair? A chair in your kitchen, under the dining table, together with the dining table? What about books? What do you think of here? Do you think about a book on a bookshelf? Or do you think about your classes, or your classrooms, or studying at the library, or a particular spot in your home that you study in? What about this one? A Weber State Wildcat. What comes to mind? Our campus, your classes, your professors, etc. What other ideas might these things elicit? As you can see, Aristotle's associationism is relevant to us. An item we see can trigger us to think of other thoughts, ideas, and link pairs of events together even. If you ever heard someone who rambles, and talks nonstop, and if you ever heard someone who rambles or talks quite a bit, you might be able to see this associationism take place and follow it through this flow of consciousness that those that ramble on and on about something might jump from one tangent to the other, triggered by another pair of event, triggered by another member of a pair of the original event. As an example, when talking to someone that doesn't stop talking or talks a lot, as an example, they often go from one subject or related event to another, where they might say something like, "I was at the store, and they were out of milk. I couldn't believe it. Speaking of milk, my friend has a dairy farm, and he used to give me milk for free. He's got a nice place, and I would love to live on a farm. That's why I want to move and get out of the city." Here we talked about milk, a dairy farm, moving out of the city. These all triggered pairs of events and memories of different events that we talked about. This just shows you the flow of consciousness, one idea linked to another, and then to another. This is especially relevant with those who have. This is especially relevant for those that I've met. This is especially relevant with those that I've met high on drugs or who are high on drugs. My last job, I used to work with the homeless population, and some of those individuals used to come high on cocaine. And some of those individuals I used to meet with were high on cocaine. Or crack. And they would talk like this a lot. One tangent to another, one tangent after another, one idea linked to another, and one that goes right after another, that goes one after the other. Many of us might suppress some of those tangents, but someone high on drugs, you can also almost see this flow of consciousness and see that they are uninhibited in their speech sometimes. I also talked to a neighbor who talks a lot, and I decided to listen to him for about 15 minutes without interruption. He was talking about planets. He was talking about plants. The planter boxes that another neighbor of ours has. A planter box that another neighbor of us has. And then he started to talk about them and started to talk about how his plants in his yard were growing. And then that spawned another tangent about trees and his desire to go plant a tree and how he needed to go to Costco to pick up several things for planting several trees in his yard. So you can kind of see how this builds. But there are essentially three principles of associationism that Aristotle described. The first is continuity. Continuity is the nearness in time or space. As an example, we often see chairs and tables together in the same time and place. In class, you sit in a chair, most likely with a desk, something to lay your notebook on or laptop on, whatever. But then frequency means that the more we are exposed to something, or the more we experience the events that are contiguous, such as the chair and the desk together, the more strongly they are associated. An example of this would be chairs. The more we see tables and chairs together, the stronger this table-chair link grows. The third principle is similarity. What would be similar between chairs and tables? Maybe they are both made of wood, often found in the classroom, and function similarly with studying or learning in class. Similarity means if two things are similar, the thought or sensation of one often tends to trigger the thought of the other. Here is a picture of a lime. What comes to mind when you see this lime? When I show this to students, they often say lemon. Lemon and limes are often paired at the grocery store, aren't they? That would be continuity, nearness in time or space. That would be continuity, nearness in space in the grocery store. It is a citrus fruit. It is a citrus fruit, and often paired with other citrus fruit, and often paired with other citrus fruit as well. It also has a round shape. Many citrus fruits have round shapes. If someone asked you what a lime tastes like, you might say, well, kind of like a lemon, but maybe more bitter. This shows you how we associate, how ideas are linked to each other. Now, philosophers would contend that our knowledge is inborn and acquired through experience. Now, philosophers and early philosophers would contend that our knowledge is either inborn or acquired through experience. Aristotle, as I mentioned, held that it is through experience. The formation of these associations we mentioned are acquired through experience. Plato thought that most of our knowledge is innate, however. You can see there are several that think differently about this. As I mentioned, most modern scientists do believe that it is more of an interaction of both. Nature versus nurture. In the nature versus nurture debate. Here is Julius Yago, a native Kenyan. He did something remarkable. He did something remarkable. He became the world champion in the javelin throw. but did not have a coach in Kenya. What did he do? He watched YouTube videos and perfected his skill, even coming from a country where there was no coach to coach him. He started throwing sticks when he was young, and against his dad's initial wishes, he would practice over and over again. While getting feedback, and he was getting feedback and learning from watching YouTube videos. While we will talk about feedback and how it can boost performance later in this course, what would an empiricist think? What would an empiricist do? But do you think he was an empiricist, or do you think a nativist? Do you think he attributed his success to nature or nurture? Just looking at him and knowing about him, it is more of an interaction of both, right? He has huge arms, well built, to throw far, probably. Physically fit, but all of what he did, coming from Kenya without a coach, and to learn to throw, was gained through practice and experience, through his interactions with the world. He is a great example of both the important role of nativism and empiricism. The nature versus... By the way, empiricism in philosophy means something different than what we might understand it today. A more modern term relating to scientific rigor or based solely on observation or experimentation. Empiricism back then, and in the context of what we're using it now, means gained through experience. Now René Descartes is someone you should know. He thought about the body functioning like a machine, a self-regulating component with self-regulating components, similar to fountains that were popular during the Renaissance. If you took a stroll through the royal gardens outside Paris, you might step on a hidden trigger, and that would release water into pipes, causing statues to move through hydraulic systems and switches. René proposed that the human body is the same way, through sensory stimuli, which causes behavioral consequences of that perception. Such a pathway from sensory stimuli to motor responses is called a reflex arc. We will discuss this reflex arc in further videos. But this is also something that holds true today. Today we know that we don't really have hydraulics or spirits like water flowing through us to cause such motor responses, but he was right that we do have a reflex arc. If you have ever burned your finger on a hot stove or touched a candle or stepped on a tack, you experience this reflex arc in action. The receptor in your finger or foot picks up the stimulus. It travels through the afferent or sensory neuron, then connects to the interneuron in the spinal cord. Then the motor neuron is activated and will result in you quickly pulling your hand away, even before this message has even been sent to your brain. That is why when you step on a tack or burn your finger, your quick reflex jolts you away before you even realize what happened. The message still does go to your brain, but it's much faster to the spinal cord and then back out to your extremities. Okay, so let's have a quick review. When recalling or experiencing something that elicits another memory which has been linked or paired with another, describes the principle of empiricism, nativism, associationism, or dualism. The answer is C, associationism. Remember, associationism can be found in many examples of things we can think of, such as a chair or a lime that we talked about, that may spark other memories, other related events, objects, or ideas. Even observing someone who can talk, who goes on a tangent or talks a lot, we can see the same flow of consciousness demonstrated, which can demonstrate this principle of associationism. Okay, next one. A philosophical school of thought that all ideas are the result of experience is... Okay, next one. A philosophical school of thought that all ideas are the result of experience is empiricism, nativism, associationism, or dualism. This is A, empiricism. Remember, empiricism means something differently today, more scientific rigor, or by observation or experiment. Really, empiricism means, in this context, and the old meaning of it, was that we are formed and shaped by our experience in the world. Okay, a philosophical school of thought that most of our knowledge is inborn is empiricism, nativism, associationism, or dualism. The answer is B, nativism. This is again how we are shaped by our inherited nature. Today we can think about that in terms of our genetic endowment. Like Julius Jaego, his big arms that enables him to perhaps have a greater capacity to throw the javelin much farther than me or others. Okay. There are three principles of associationism. They are A, knowledge data theory, B, stimulus response reflex arc, C, dualism, nativism, empiricism, D, continuity, frequency, or similarity. The answer is C, continuity, frequency, and similarity. Continuity is nearness in time or space. Something together in time or space tends to elicit memory, a memory or idea, or a stronger memory or idea than the other member of the pair. Something together in time or space tends to elicit a memory or idea of the other member of the pair. Then frequency, meaning how frequent the items are paired together. A table and chair, as an example, we often see together, so they are often paired together in one's mind. Then similarity, items that are similar to each other, such as the lime or lemon, such as the lime and lemon. We tend to remember both of them, and one idea of one, and the idea of one member tends to elicit another idea of the other. All right, see you in the next video.